Do these glasses make me look smart? I really hope so, because I need something to distract from the nonsense that's probably gonna come out of my mouth. Hi everyone, I'm Bria and welcome to my channel, Tales of Tales. And today we are going to be going over my top books of 2021. So in 2021, I read a total of 42 books, which for me is great. My goal was 37, so 42 was great for me. However, I have said in a couple videos that I feel like I've kind of had a meh reading year just when it comes to the quality of books that I've been reading, and I still think that that's kind of true, but I did learn in 2021 certain things in books that I really like and certain things that I don't like. So it's only up from here for 2022. So these 10 books I'm going to talk about are ranked by my general enjoyment. My true top books of the year are going to be from 5 or 6 onward. So until then, all of the numberings are going to be arbitrary. So just keep that in mind as I'm talking about them. But let's get started. So the first book I'm going to talk about, or my number 10, is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. Going into this book, all I really knew was that it's a very beloved book of the sci-fi community. I actually really had no idea what it was actually about. So a quick synopsis of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Essentially, Earth is about to be demolished to make way for kind of like a galactic highway. They just figured, whatever, humans are dumb, we're just gonna wipe them off so we can make this highway in the galaxy. So we follow Arthur, who is the main character, and Arthur gets plucked off of Earth right before Earth is destroyed by a researcher who is tasked to recreate the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and we follow their journey through space and we meet a lot of different and interesting characters. There's robots, there's human-like characters, there's a varied amount of characters in this book. But I don't think anything could have prepared me for the laughs and the quirkiness that this book gave me, and I really enjoyed it. This book was comical and kind of nonsensical at certain points, and so I ended up making this confused but humorous face every time I'd read the book, kind of like this. I'd be like, okay, that's funny, but I'm kind of confused. I understand why so many people love it, and by no means is this going to be a new favorite of all time for me, but I was just surprised by how much I enjoyed it. And I think that you're only gonna like this if you have a specific type of humor, but I'm putting it on this list simply because it really surprised me, and honestly, I had a blast reading it. Okay, so the next book I want to talk about is also another book that surprised me and that I just really enjoyed, and that is Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey. So as a Texan, there's this certain intrigue and interest in Matthew McConaughey. I think one, because he's a native Texan, but also more recently because there are rumblings of him running for governor. And so I wasn't really expecting much out of this book, to be honest with you. I really was just looking for a short-ish audiobook, and I'd heard good things about it, and honestly, I could listen to his accent all day. But this book, like I said, really ended up surprising me. Instead of it being a very straightforward memoir, Matthew kind of structures this book by talking about certain moments in his life, and he compares them to traffic lights, hence the title of the book, Green Lights. And Matthew, he's a more well-rounded person than I thought he was. And I hate to admit that I kind of judged a book by his cover there, but some of his experiences I was just very surprised about, and I won't ruin all of it, but for example, he applied to an HBCU, and if you don't know what HBCU is, it's a historically Black college or university. And so me having this image of blonde pretty boy Matthew McConaughey, and then reading his life experiences and how he's framed them and how he works through situations and those types of things was just, well, like I said, was just really surprising, and I actually did get a lot out of it. Yeah, I really enjoyed this, and if you're looking for a good audiobook, definitely give that one a go. So the next book I'm going to talk about in my top books of 2021 is Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. And I know what you're going to say. Bria, I can't believe you haven't read this already. I know. I also couldn't believe I was waiting till 2021 to read this book. But here we are, and I'm glad I read it when I did. So for those of you who were also living under the same rock I was and haven't read this yet, Between the World and Me is a letter from a Black man to his son. And so the book explores like what it really means to be Black and, you know, grappling with things day to day, but also what that means, you know, kind of coming to truths of what it means in America's history. And you know, this book was written in 2015 and it was very relevant then, but obviously I read this book in 2021 and 6 years later, the book is still absolutely relevant. And like the outlook almost on like America when it comes to race is still essentially the same 6 years later, which is kind of like a bleak look on America in general, but that's a whole nother conversation for another day. But I think you can get a lot out of this book regardless of the race that you are. I think you can get a good insight into the Black American experience. And so I definitely recommend Between the World and Me if you haven't picked it up yet. So the next book on my top 10 of 2021 is The Final Revival, Opal and Nev by Donnie Walton. I refer to this book as Opal and Nev. So Opal and Nev is a book about an iconic interracial like music duo who really gained popularity in the 70s. And we learn about their rise to fame, their breakup, and some dark secrets that arise when they try to reunite for a reunion tour. So with a possible reunion tour on the horizon, a journalist takes this chance to curate an oral history of the duo. So the story is told completely through like interviews with both Opal and Nev and friends and family, and I guess you would call them co-workers. And let me tell you, this book is a lot more than what it seems. It's a lot more than just a book about two people becoming famous. Because as the interviews progress, we realize that some of the events that happened with the duo aren't what they seemed. Some people was lying, some people was scheming. And there is a lot of like social commentary really relevant to the 70s, but also relevant like to today's time when it comes to race and like their treatment of Black people regardless if you are famous or not. And because these interviews were gathered with the idea of it being an oral history, this book really felt like a true story. Like I really forgot that these are fictional characters. I really wanted to Google like, where's Opal? Where's Nev? What are they up to now? You know, but they're not real. So I listened to this book on audio and I highly recommend taking it in that way. There's a full cast and the characters in this book are already really distinct and really unique, but having a full cast read them through the audiobook really just kind of heightened the entire experience. And this is a story that will stick with me for a while, and it's a book that I'll probably be recommending to a few more people as time goes on, and you'll probably see it again at some point in 2022, but definitely recommend The Final Revival of Opal and Nev. So the next book on my list at number 6 is Emergency Skin by N.K. Jemisin. So Emergency Skin is actually a short story in the Forward collection, which is a collection of 6 works that is kind of sci-fi based, and it talks about what the near and distant future can look like. And the other 6 stories had authors like Blake Crouch, Veronica Roth, Andy Weir. So I enjoyed the entire collection as a whole, but I want to specifically talk about Emergency Skin. But this story really stood out to me, not only with the entire collection, but with my entire reading year. And that really says a lot because the short story is literally only like 40 pages. But N.K. Jemisin, she has the secret sauce. Whatever she be putting in her books, magic. So in Emergency Skin, we follow this explorer who is sent to Earth to gather some data on this planet that their ancestors left centuries ago. And so the explorer goes on this mission with the only warning that it's going to be a desert zone down there. It's going to be a graveyard down there, so be careful. But then they get there and that wasn't necessarily the case. And that's all I'm going to say about it, because N.K. Jemisin was able to give us an entire world, an entire story, and was able to give us a viewpoint of a character's entire life and had us understanding the decisions and the things that they were contemplating, all within 40 pages. And if N.K. Jemisin's gonna do one thing, she's gonna make you think, okay? I will say that this story is a lot more digestible than some of her other works. If you've read The Fifth Season, or if you read The City We Became, those works are a little harder to digest initially, but they're definitely worth it. This is a little bit more digestible because it's such a short story, but she still makes you think in a completely different way and will have you sitting there just contemplating a lot of things. So the next book I want to talk about is Ring Shout by P. Djeli Clark. The first line on the Goodreads synopsis is, "In America, demons wear white hoods." And if that's not going to tell you that the book was going to slap, I don't know what will. So Ring Shout is a dark fantasy / horror novel that is set in 1915 America, where demons that are called Ku Kluxes are literally born from dark and hateful thoughts. So we follow a gang of resistance fighters that hunts and kills these demons, but they can sense that something bigger and something more sinister is on the horizon when it comes to these Ku Kluxes. So we follow their journey as they kind of figure out what that bigger and more sinister plan is. So this is a fairly short book, but it packs a lot of punch within those pages, let me tell you. Something that I really enjoy in horror books and in like fantasy novels is when like truth and history is like interwoven into the story, like when there's like a sense of reality that's, you know, part of the story. And this book is full of that, especially when it comes to like African American history. So the Ring Shout is actually a part of African American history, and that was something that I learned reading this book. So after I finished reading, I was quick to go do a lot of research on the Ring Shout, as well as some of the other things that were mentioned in this book. So not only did I gather, you know, an enjoyment for this book and this fictional world itself, but I also got to gather some good information about like actual history. And if you watch my vlog where I read horror and dark fantasy books by Black authors, I actually originally gave this book 4 stars, but as the year continued to progress and, you know, I really started to think back on my 2021 reading year and some of the books that I read, this was one of those books that like really stuck out in my mind, and a book that since I've read it, I've recommended it to like a lot of people to read. And so here I am also recommending it to you. If you like horror or dark fantasy and that's interlaced with a little bit of reality, this is for you. So at number 4, we have Act Your Age, Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert. So this is the last book in the Brown Sister series, and I'm so sad about it. But in this story, we obviously follow Eve, and after multiple attempts at trying to find a career that she likes and that she can stick with, she's quit like 15 jobs at this point, her parents decide to cut her off until she can find and stay at a job for at least a year. So on a whim, she decides to interview for a chef position at a bed and breakfast, and that is where we meet Jacob. And Jacob is the bed and breakfast owner. And Jacob is someone who has the need to control a lot of things, and he's like very straightforward, sometimes brutally honest. So when Eve and Jacob meet, they really should hate each other, but you know, as romances go, they don't. You know, I think this might be my favorite book out of the Brown Sisters series. The steam in this book had me reading and my mouth was literally open. And I also think the dynamic of like the grumpy sunshine type of thing going on was actually really enjoyable to read as well. And I think the thing that I appreciate the most about this entire Brown Sister series is like the representation that's in these books. And in this book specifically, there is representation for autism, and for someone who has and has had people in their life with autism, I just really enjoyed the representation in here and getting to see characters with autism fall in love. And you know, I'm going to miss this series. I really am. But now I just have an excuse to pick up the rest of Talia Hibbert's books. At number 3, we have 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. So 7 Days in June is a second chance romance where we follow 2 characters, Eve and Shane, who as teenagers spent a week together falling in love. So we open the book following Eve, who is a erotica writer. She experiences these chronic debilitating migraines, and she's also a single mother to a 12-year-old who I think might be one of my new favorite characters of all time. And then we have Shane, who is a literary fiction writer who is a recovering addict and is now a teacher and helps mentor kids in underserved communities. Now, decades later, both of them being authors, they have a chance encounter at a literary event, and it's the first time they've seen each other since they were teenagers, and they spent that week falling in love. So after this chance encounter, we get to see them interacting over the next 7 days as they start to reconnect, but we also get a past view of the 7 days of them falling in love, and we get to see like what kind of traumas they were experiencing in the past, but also how those are impacting them in the future and how that's impacting their relationship in current day. And so even with some of the complexities of the relationship and the traumas that both characters experienced, this book still managed to feel like warm and like relatable and even like humorous at times. So like while it had all these layers, it still had these moments where it just like felt really light, and it felt, you know, you're just watching 2 people like reconnect and re-fall in love, and like it was beautiful. And I could talk about this book all day, but I'm not, because I'm going to be doing a live show with Chanel over on Chanel Time talking about this book. So you'll hear some more thoughts that I have, because there is a lot to say about 7 Days in June. All right, so we are getting to the big dogs. We are getting to my top 2 books of 2021. And let me tell you, both of these I think are gonna be my favorites of all time for a while. And so at number 2, we have Legendborn by Tracy Dion. So in Legendborn, we follow Bree, who is a 16-year-old trying to find like a physical and mental escape from her hometown after her mother dies in an accident. So she enrolls in this early college program where she like actually gets to live on campus, but things go awry when she witnesses a magical demon attack at a party that she goes to. And with this demon attack, she ends up encountering a secret society of students at the college, and they call themselves Legendborn. And so Bree gets further thrown into the mix of this secret society when she really uncovers the fact that she has her own unique type of magic, and that when she starts to unbury some of these memories that were lost to her, she realizes that this secret society and her mother's death are connected. I have not been this immersed and this engaged and this invested in a story in a really, really long time. I really connected with Bree, our main character. You know, she's young and she's definitely not a perfect character, but in a way that's like realistic. You know, she's still working through real grief with the loss of her mother, and we get to see how that impacts her relationships and her thought process and her actions while, you know, trying to figure out like what actually happened to her mom. And at the same time, we also get to see her truly grow throughout the story. And you know, while we get the typical things that you get in a YA fantasy, you know, you get the magic, you get the demons, you know, you get the love triangle. This book was just so much deeper than I like thought it was going to be, and I am just so heavily invested. And I'm someone who doesn't even like love triangles, but I have a favorite. I am definitely rooting for one of these characters, and that's why this book is number 2 on my top 10 books of 2021. This book just kind of reignited my love for fantasy, and it just reminded me why I fell in love with it in the first place. And it just kind of reminded me of those memories of reading, you know, fantasy books when I was younger, and I would just stay up all night and want to know what happened and just like, you know, just keep frantically flipping through pages. That's what happened with this, and it was magical and it was so special. And immediately after I closed this book, I Googled when the sequel was going to come out. And there hasn't been a book in a while where I have been anxiously anticipating the sequel. But with Legendborn, I'm ready. I'm ready. I gotta wait until November, but I'm ready. So in the #1 spot, we have Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. So Project Hail Mary is a soul survival story where we follow a character who's on a last chance space mission to try to save Earth. But he wakes up with some memory loss, and he wakes up with the rest of his crew dead on the ship. So he doesn't know what he's actually there to do. He doesn't even remember his name. So this is like a part scientific mystery, part interstellar journey, but it's also a story of survival and an unexpected friendship. So the writing in here in parts is scientific, but it's definitely pared down enough for the reader to understand it. And while there are scientific elements, this book is still super engaging, and we really get to follow the character as he is problem solving in real time, as he is getting his memories back in real time. And similar to The Martian, Andy Weir does a fantastic job of adding comedy and like humorous elements in a situation that for anybody else would be very stark and very dire. And the surprise friendship in here is, it's so good. And like, you can't really even talk about the friendship without it being a spoiler. The little chicken nugget in here, it's just so cute. And it's like the friendship that I didn't know I needed in 2021. And honestly, the friendship in here is what makes the entire book. So if you are intrigued, please read this. And that wraps up my top 10 books of 2021. If you made it to the end of this video, you are my favorite. Literally my favorite person ever. And let me know down below in the comments if you read anything that I mentioned in this video. Let me know if you loved it, if you hated it, if you think my reading taste is shit. I want to hear it. And I hope that you guys have a fantastic 2022. I hope that it's been off to a fantastic start already. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye. Look at me knowing things.